Your Excellencies, all protocol observed. I am honored to present to you the Youth Declaration on Positive Masculinity, a result of the Youth Consultation on Positive Masculinity in Leadership, aimed at addressing the pervasive issue of violence against women and girls in Africa. The Chair, in acknowledging the role of youth in shaping the future of our continent, we, the youth leaders and advocates of positive masculinity, gathered with shared commitment to foster inclusive, equitable, and empowering leadership for all. Today, on behalf of all participants, our Continental Youth Consultation engaged over 120 diverse youth from the African Union member states, serving as a platform to share perspectives, assess the outcomes of the first and second African Union Men's Conference, the Kinshasa Declaration, and the Dakar Call to Action. Today, on behalf of all participants, I am honored to present our recommendations to this assembly. We recognize the historical impact of gender norms on leadership and affirm the need to challenge and redefine traditional masculinity. Positive masculinity, as we see it, embraces qualities such as empathy, collaboration, and emotional intelligence essential for nurturing effective and compassionate leaders. To this end, we urgently call upon heads of state and AU to accelerate these three critical areas. 1, develop a comprehensive legislation and enforcement, legislation that criminalizes all forms of violence against women and girls, while ensuring effective mechanisms and accountability for perpetrators. Secondly, ensure inclusive education and awareness of online culture, integrating comprehensive education programs in schools, addressing the gender stereotypes, relationship, consent, and the impact of online culture on perceptions of masculinity, while raising awareness about cybercrime and online violence against women and girls. But then, thirdly, youth leadership and empowerment. Actively involve youth in decision-making processes, ensuring that our voices are heard in discussions, especially on positive masculinity, gender-based violence, and related policies. Foster a sense of respect, a culture of respect and inclusivity through youth-led initiatives, recognizing that the potential for transformative change in attitudes and behaviors. Your Excellencies, this Youth Declaration on Positive Masculinity in Youth Leadership reflects our commitment to fostering a culture of respect, equality, and empathy. And as we stand on the brink of a new era, we dedicate ourselves to dismantling all rules of violence against women and girls, viewing positive masculinity not merely as a goal, but as a journey towards a more harmonious society. We earnestly call upon the leaders of the African Union and the leaders of Africa to invest in comprehensive educational programs, heed our collective voices, and actively involve us in leadership and decision-making processes. Because by so doing, we believe we can create a future where stereotypes are replaced with inclusive and equitable values, allowing every individual to thrive in an environment that is free from all forms of violence and discrimination. May this declaration serve as a catalyst for change, inspiring our generations and those to come, transforming Africa into a beacon of positive masculinity, a century where the rise and dignity of all, especially women and girls, are upheld and celebrated. I extend my heartfelt gratitude to the leaders of Africa and the African Union for promoting and putting our voices as integral part in promoting positive masculinity in leadership. We respectfully urge the African Union to consider these valuable insights from the youth, recognizing that there is a form of transformative progress that can be unlocked by harnessing our dynamism and our diverse perspective. I thank you all.
Thank you so much to our young people. We now invite private sector. Imali. Come. Thank you so much, Thabo.
Your Excellencies, Honorable Ministers, respectable guests, please allow me to stand on existing protocols. Now, my Basotho ancestors would be remiss on me if I didn't correct a slight pronunciation issue. Kasesotho and ally is pronounced D, so Redimema. So, Thabo Dimema, L-I-D. I think my Lesotho people know, and other Basothos in the room. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, a hybrid regional private sector consultation was held on the 17th of November 2023 with leaders from business and labor across the African region. The consultation explored the theme of harnessing the private sector towards a safe and inclusive environment for women and girls. The presidency organized a hybrid consultation from the Republic of South Africa in partnership with Shared Value Africa Initiative, AUDA NEPAD, and East and Southern Africa Regional Office of the International Labour Organization. I am honored, as one of the speakers during this private sector roundtable, to present to you, Excellencies, the outcomes document at the 3rd AU Men's Conference on Positive Masculinity in Leadership to End Violence Against Women and Girls, hosted by His Excellency President Cyril Ramaphosa and His Excellency President Azali Assoumani. At this consultation, 80 stakeholders in the private sector came together, representing business associations, organized labor, banking, energy and telecommunications sector, chambers of commerce and industry, companies, entrepreneurs, academia, civil society organization, representatives of government organs and organs of the African Union, entities of the United Nations and other development agencies. The stakeholders at the meeting were from 18 African countries covering all 5 regions. The overall objective of a private sector consultation was to reflect on 2 things. 1, the role of business and labor in mitigating the socio-economic aspects of violence against women in the workplace. And 2, how this could be factored into a draft AU convention on ending violence against women and girls. The consultation also evaluated the progress made before men's conferences, developed strategies to bridge existing shortcomings, and established a definition of positive masculinity, but in an African context. Your Excellencies, reflections by business and labor on the current state of interventions to end violence against women and girls, as well as some of the commitments by business and labor to end violence against women and girls in the world of work, are included in a detailed draft. And in the interest of time, ladies and gentlemen, I'll go straight to the recommendations that we would like to make. We commend the critical role played by a Circle of Champions to demonstrate leadership towards positive masculinity and male leadership to end violence against women and girls. We further commend the decision of the African Union heads of states to develop and adopt a convention to end violence against women and girls. We call on the African Union heads of states to consider the following proposal for inclusion in the Convention to End Violence Against Women and Girls. Number 1, adopt an integrated and holistic transformative strategy that promotes gender equality and positive masculinity, address structural barriers, and encourage cultural transformation while ensuring an enabling legal environment to end violence against women and girls. It should be adopted as a whole society approach, emphasizing the need to enhance collaboration across sectors, as well as with full participation of the youth. Secondly, fully embrace the concept of positive masculinity and underpin the importance of male leadership to end violence against women and girls. Reflect on the significance of political commitment to positive masculinity as exemplified by initiatives like the Circle of Champions. which showcases African presidents' dedication to this cause. Clearly defined terms such as positive masculinity to enhance understanding, communication, and connection to effective solutions. Thirdly, we urge member states to incorporate into the convention existing regional frameworks like the Maputo Protocol, which links violence against women with its socio-economic impacts, as well as global treaties like the ILO C-190, which guarantees women's safety in the world of work. Furthermore, adopt an accountability framework to ensure that AU member states and other stakeholders implement their commitments. And lastly, consider the economic drivers of violence against women and girls, and further stipulate clear interventions to reduce women's economic vulnerability through ownership of productive assets, access to finance, support to the informal sector, recognizing and valuing women's reproductive labor, supply chain opportunities for women-owned businesses, and skills training. As leaders in the business sector across the region, we commit to joining hands with the heads of state to ensure that our societies and the world of work are safe, free, and enabling for all women, including women, for all people, including women, all women, and to allow women to reach their full potential. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you.
Thank you very much. President, private sector like the youth, civil society, women, all held consultations which were attended by people from all over the continent. It is those participants who have given them the presentations they are making here today. As you could hear, they are also addressing themselves about the things they will do, but of course they are also supporting the protocol. And we want to thank our colleagues who are online. Many of them also participated in these consultations. And we will now hear from the religious and traditional leaders who will be represented by Chief Gogo Madzimawe. After Chief Madzimawe, it will be Dr. John Oti, who will be virtual representing academia, and after this, Dr. Anthony Ajay, who will represent civil society.
Thank you so much, Chairperson. I'm representing the tradition and religious leaders in Africa, representing the Council of Traditional Leaders, Tradition and Religious Leaders of Africa, which is called COTLA. And I am the convener for the SADC region, so I'm equally part of the host, Your Excellencies. We, the participants of the consultations with the tradition and religious leaders held on the 17th to 18th November 2023 in Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo, are proud to make our collective contributions and recommendations to the Third African Union Men's Conference on Positive Masculinity in Leadership to End Violence Against Women and Girls. We further congratulate the African Union Commission and its member states for the high-level initiative on positive masculinity in DRC at the inaugural African Union's Men's Conference convened by the President of the Democratic Republic of Congo, President Felix Tshisekedi, the then chairperson of the AU and current champion on positive masculinity, in November 2021. We also take into account the Kinshasa Declaration adopted after the DRC's conference, as well as the Dakar Call to Action in Senegal, adopted at the second AU Men's Conference under the leadership of His Excellency President Macky Sall of Senegal in November 2022. We also congratulate you, Your Excellency, President Cyril Ramaphosa, for hosting this year's Men's Conference together with your co-host, the President of the Union of Comoros and the current AU Chairperson, President Azari Assoumani. Your Excellencies, allow me to also thank the African Union Commission, the government, the UN Women, UNFPA, UNDP, and MONUSCO for the continued support towards mobilization and capacitations of the tradition and religious leaders through the Council of Tradition and Religious Leaders of Africa, COTLA. We have reached this level due to the support by these institutions and government and other mechanisms at continental, regional, and national levels. COTLA, Your Excellency, is the union formed for tradition and religious leaders to spearhead the positive cultural transformation agenda from the AU level to the local government level in all member states. We are committed through the declaration that culture and religion should be part of the solution and not part of the problem. We are also committed to promote positive masculinity in Africa by bringing the African man back to the original respect of an African woman as a mother to humankind through cultural transformation. We must reclaim positive African cultures that protect rights, dignity, and Ubuntu. As COTLA, we call for increased support in awareness campaign on positive mindset change across communities in order to change the societal narrative which puts household chores as a gender role for women. We strongly commit a zero-tolerance policy towards all forms of violence against women and girls and fully support all the charters, protocols, and initiatives on the women's rights by positively transforming our cultures and religion. We also support the establishment of a centralized platform for tradition and religious leaders at all levels, from continental, regional, national, and local government level. Your Excellency, let's collaborate to operate and win the fight as adopted in the Kinshasa Declaration and the Dakar Call to Action. Lastly, we are not here only to commit, but to work alongside you as we already are walking the talk. All we need is your optimum support at all levels. Your Excellency, a woman needs real empowerment. A woman does not need a blesser. Therefore, I just want to quote, many of my mothers have been quoting the debated sons of Africa. I'm going to quote you as a living son of Africa, where you said, Pansi, nama blessa Pansi. Thank you.
Pansi ngama blessa Pansi. Pansi ngama blessa Pansi. Thank you very much. For those who don't know, I'm a blessers about sugar daddy. We thank COTLA. Very happy about how COTLA has developed. This president is an association of traditional leaders from across the continent. It has been a pleasure to work with them. We started to work with them while I was still at UN Women. They've worked on ending the horrible, harmful practice of forcing children to marry old men. They have worked against FGM. They've obviously worked against physical and sexual violence, and they are here now in full force to support you. I hope you can see how much support and enthusiasm there is for this process from the whole continent. And now we will be asking Dr. John Oti, who will join us virtually. I hope the technique will work with us now. He represents the Academia of Clever. So, are we good? Is it working well?
Yes, can you hear me? Good morning.
John, can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay, please go ahead.
Should I go ahead? Good morning. I bring you greetings from Cape Coast in Ghana. And Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, permit me to ride on the already established protocol. Am I audible?
Yeah, if you could be louder, John. Some volume.
Can you hear me?
Please talk.
Okay, all right. So as I said, permit Your Excellencies, distinguished participants, please permit me to write on the already established protocol. I bring you recommendations from the academia. First, the academia is calling for the need to scale up risk. On beneficial trade, or should try to carry out in-depth
Can you hear?
and also pay attention to contextual nuances and also differences to help us unpack issues of positive traits when it comes to the male identity on the continent. Secondly, the academia is calling for a continuous gender assessment in each country. And here again, our recommendation is that these gender assessments should not only identify needs or challenges, but rather they should also focus on identifying local opportunities that can be tapped into when we are designing interventions that can help us curb or mitigate violence against women and girls. Again, the Academy is recommending that we should consciously engage more men as allies as well as active participants in advancing gender equality on the continent. The next recommendation has to do with continuous engagement or collaboration between the Academy and also other government or state agencies, particularly in the area of policy formulation and implementation. We in the Academy, again, we are calling for training by men for men to understand the negative impact of holding on to rigid or toxic ideas of masculinities on their own physical and mental well-being. As a young academic and also somebody who researched on gender-related issues, I must say that every good research is underpinned by good funding. And in this regard, we in the Academy are calling on the AU and also member states to provide a seed fund that can be used in carrying out transformative gender-related research on the issues of masculinities. This, we believe, can be done through a formation of consortium among African academics who can really unpack these issues using the post-colonial lens and also using the lens of intersectionality, where we are going to pay attention to contextual differences and nuances. As you all know, men on the continent are not the same. Even men within the same community are not the same, in a sense that there are several markers of identity that makes men different. So without this lens, any intervention, any policy, any protocol, any declaration, any legal framework that fails to recognize these nuances or contextual differences will certainly fail. Finally, as a young academic on the continent and also somebody who researches on this theme, I must say that we are tired. We are tired for continuously chasing funding opportunities from the global West. In this regard, we call on our heads of states and also the AU and other related organizations to support funding in terms of to provide funding for research for academics on the continent. And finally, we are calling for the establishment of a center of excellence that will focus on masculinity studies in the long term. This can be done by citing one of the gender centers in one of our prestigious universities on the continent, and they can start this center of excellence, which will focus mainly on masculinity studies. This center can then serve as a hub for policymakers and other key stakeholders who may need data to inform the type of interventions or policies that they design. Finally, to end my submission, I will say that we in the academy are always available and ready to support in unpacking the issues of toxic masculinities and also identifying the traits or beneficial aspects of masculinities that can be scaled up. On this note, I say thank you, Medase, Asante Sana, and enjoy the rest of the discussion.
Very much, John, and much appreciated that we now have men who research on gender. In my time in gender studies, you'd only find women studying women. And it has been a real need to see that this is not something that is just confined to women. So thank you, John. We now will call on Dr. Anthony Ajibes to represent civil society. That we will go back to the video that we did not see.
Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols duly observed, I'm honored to present to you the key recommendations from the civil society organization's pre-consultation meeting that took place on the 16th of October 2023, convened by the Gender is My Agenda campaign network, as well as in collaboration and partnership with partners. At the pre-consultation, a total of 300 individuals across African countries, and in particular from 220 civil society organizations, including Africans from diaspora, took part in this consultation. All of them had opportunities to discuss 4 key objectives of the consultation through presentations, group discussions, as well as questions and answers. So the 4 key objectives that guided the discussion and consultation were: 1, to review progress on the implementation of the outcomes of the first and second men's conference. 2nd, was to foster a comprehensive and culturally sensitive understanding of positive masculinity. The 3rd objective was to highlight the critical elements that CSOs would love to see included in the draft AU Ending Violence Against Women and Girls Convention. And then lastly, was to explore how to strengthen the role and engagement of CSOs in the initiative, as well as ensure their active participation in the formulation and implementation of policies and programs related to gender equality and prevention of violence against women and girls. Now, on the first objective, the civil society organizations noted that the Kinshasa Declaration and call for action by the African Union, head of states, and government demonstrates their commitment to take concrete action to address violence against women and girls. They also noted that the Ending Violence Against Women and Girls Convention is a part of a broader regional effort to address violence against women and girls in Africa. However, they noted that while the conferences resulted in a number of commitments from head of states and governments to promote positive masculinity and address gender-based violence, there have been significant gaps in implementation of these commitments. And they trace the challenges that impact the limited implementation to 2 major reasons. One is lack of resources to support the implementation of gender-related programs and initiatives, as well as a lack of political will to implement gender-related policies. So they therefore call for a robust implementation of these commitments and continuous monitoring of progress to ensure that transformative changes due to these commitments are well documented. On the second objective, which is towards a comprehensive and culturally sensitive understanding of positive masculinity, we noted that when defining positive masculinity in the African context, that it is important to consider the good traditional African values, norms, and practices related to positive masculinity, but also to reject the negative African masculinity practices. It is also important to value the experiences of men and boys in Africa, as well as their challenges, vis-a-vis to consider how we can engage them to contribute to gender equality and elimination of violence against women and girls. In fact, we define positive masculinity as behaviors and traits that promote the development of healthy, respectful, and equitable relationship between men and women, based on principles of gender equality, non-violence, and mutual respect. The CSO emphasized that positive masculinity begins with the redistribution of power, resources, and opportunities within society to address systemic inequality, which is essential for removing barriers that perpetuate violence. The CSO recognized that that continuous advocacy to change policies and legislation that perpetuates gender-based violence demand shared leadership with men, who are often privileged in patriarchal societies, where their violent behaviors are rationalized and justified. On the third objective, which centers on what CSOs would like to see in the Ending Violence Against Women Convention. First, we would like to see a comprehensive definition of violence against women and girls, but not only in definition, we would also like all forms of violence against women and girls in all settings, including at home, online, public spaces, workplaces, and conflict and humanitarian settings addressed in the convention. CSO strongly canvassed for a strong focus on prevention, as well as effective remedies and support for victims. To this end, we would like to emphasize the inclusion of a clear and comprehensive set of rights for victims of gender-based violence, as well as accountability mechanism for perpetrators. We noted that there is a need to ensure that existing protocols, conventions and policies relating to violence against women and girls are well integrated into the draft to avoid duplication of effort and ensure that the convention is comprehensive and effective. And lastly, on the role of civil society organizations, in recognition of the significant role of civil society organizations in ending violence against women and girls in Africa communities, we underscore the importance of representation of civil society organizations in the consultation, negotiation, and drafting of the Ending Violence Against Women and Girls Convention. And lastly, we would also like to highlight the shrinking civil space on the continent and the need for more protection for workers of civil society organizations against harassment and intimidation. And lastly, we call for more financial and technical support for civil society organizations to carry out their work effectively. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So we will now go back to the screen, and hopefully we will be able to hear Professor Sanai.
Good morning, Excellencies, heads of states and governments, dignitaries, invited guests, partners and participants, all protocols observed. It's really an honor to be with you, and thank you, His Excellency President Ramaphosa, for bringing us together and for championing this issue and the African Union Convention on Ending Violence Against Women and Girls. You truly have been a tireless champion in your effort, and I think the continent is better because of it. I really apologize for some of the technical challenges we've had. I was given the daunting task of trying to provide an overview of violence against women and girls in African region in just a few minutes. And the sheer fact that the order fell out of place, you've heard a lot now, and I will still do my level best. But I want to use this opportunity to implore all of you in the room, especially those that have the power to legislate, to allocate national and institutional budgets, or those that can put consequential policies in place to do so, and move beyond reviewing statistics and signing declarations and convenings to really doing what needs to be done. And that's the only and sure way to end violence against women and girls. And frankly, we hear a lot about women leadership. As a women leader myself, we're not looking for tokenism or putting few women in power position, but really a sea change that unleashes the potential of every African girl and woman and benefits all of us. And we at the Buffett Foundation are honored to partner with all of you to support this crucial work. Much has been said in this meeting and in the first and second African Union Men's Conference regarding the statistics, but some are worth repeating. In Africa, violence against women and girls is the most widespread human rights violation. More than 1 in 3 women experience a form of violence in their lifetime. And in some African countries, nearly half of all women experience intimate partner violence, specifically.
Our champions. These are the presidents to whom we have delegated the leadership of this work. And we are excited when we see you there. And we hope we are also encouraging you to continue with the work. And this was to prepare you for the stage. And I'm going to ask the president to speak from
the President of the Union of Comoros and of course the Chair of the African Union. And Your Excellency, Sister President Wokuwetshi, President of Ethiopia, and Your Excellency, Mama President, Ellen Joseph Sirleaf, former President of Liberia, and more importantly, patron for the work that we are performing today. And thank you very much for continuing to be the patron of this important work. I also extend my greetings to the African Union Special Envoy on Women, Peace and Security. I also want to extend my greetings to ministers and deputy ministers who are here present, and the Deputy Speaker of the Parliament of the Republic of South Africa, and representatives of women's organizations gathered here from across our beautiful continent. Thank you very much, my dearest sisters, for being here to represent the women of our country, of our continent. And representatives of business, academia, interfaith, youth organizations and civil society, guests and ladies and gentlemen. I take this opportunity to greet you all and to welcome you to South Africa, to this very important third African Union Men's Conference on Positive Masculinity. As South Africa, we are truly honored to have been given the opportunity to host this conference, but also to do so jointly with President Azali Assoumani, my dear brother, who continues to walk very difficult paths with a number of us, leading us and showing us the way forward, as he also recently, when we went to Ukraine and Russia to get African leaders to seek for peace in a place that is so far away from our own continent. Thank you very much, President Assoumani, for your leadership. We're meeting in a week that the annual campaign of 16 days of activism against gender-based violence commences across the globe. In fact, President Sirleaf Johnson referred to it as having gotten into the fourth day of this campaign. And in this respect, today's conference is one of many events being organized across the world to draw attention to this terrible scourge that is being perpetrated against the women and girls of our continent and indeed in the world. What makes this conference exceptional is that our focus is on the role of men and boys in bringing about a world that is free of violence against women and girls, Africa, gender-based violence. We are here because we know that men and boys must be at the forefront of the change that must happen. We are also here because we know that there is an alternative to a society, a continent, and a world where women are oppressed, discriminated against, and their rights suppressed. There is an alternative. And this conference has been exploring that alternative through a number of presentations that have been made here. What type of world do we seek? We seek a world in which every African man, woman, and child can live in true freedom and equality with their rights respected, upheld, and advanced. We know that such a world is within our reach if we focus on the prevention of all forms of violence against women and children and girls. We cannot realize a society free of violence against women and girls without critically interrogating what one could call the assumptions around patriarchy, around male chauvinism and sexism. It is these assumptions, and in some cases traditions, that lead young men and boys to believe that women are property, that they are worth less than themselves as men, and that they are deserving of ill treatment. This is a conversation that men need to have. And I'm glad that at this conference and the past few summits that have been held, 2 summits, these discussions and conversations are going on. Men in the main are the perpetrators of violence against women and girls. At the same time, it is men who have the power to bring about the change that we so need in society. They have the power, and we must focus on unleashing that power that the men have, because they are the perpetrators. So we must focus on them. The unity, self-reliance, self-determination, freedom, the progress and prosperity we collectively strive towards under the AU's Agenda 2063 are being undermined by gender-based violence. Such violence and leaving more than half of Africa's population in a state of anxiety. This
Testing.
there does seem to be discrimination. I wouldn't say against men, but I would say against me. Ladies and gentlemen, this conference is essentially about promoting positive masculinity. And a number of speakers have spoken here about what positive masculinity is, and they've sought to give it some form of a definition. This conference, therefore, is about challenging traditional stereotypes with being a man. It involves redefining norms and expectations placed on men. Positive masculinity encourages men to embrace qualities such as empathy, vulnerability, emotional intelligence, and respect for diversity. One of the speakers who stood up here, a very tall gentleman, spoke about precisely this. Earlier this year, I convened the Presidential Young Men and Boys in Daba, a forum where we talk amongst young boys in Soweto. I had the opportunity to talk with these young men who see themselves as change makers in the fight against gender-based violence. These young men face a lot of pressures that affect their attitudes towards women and girls. And they took time to speak openly, and they dealt with very complex and difficult issues that hitherto they would have found difficult to talk to in earlier times, either to their parents or grandparents. And these included the lack of positive role models, absentee fathers, vulnerability to recruitment by criminals, pressure to drop out of school and earn a living, and pressure to become sexually active before they are even ready to do so. These young men who exhibit or seek to learn positive masculinity said that they are tired of being seen as the problem when they want to be part of the solution. This is why it is so important that a conference such as this brings us together to look at how we can create more spaces for young men and boys to engage amongst their peers without fear of judgment. I was particularly pleased, Program Director, when you asked the men who are gathered here to stand up so that they can be seen. Not so much to show that they are the warriors and they are the ones who are, up front, but to see that we've got men who are committing themselves and by so doing becoming role models in our own countries and on the continent to lead the charge against gender-based violence. And also to have the champions, the various heads of states that you displayed on the stage, on the screen. It is pleasing that we're beginning to see this change that is bound to take place on our continent. As South Africa, we have a number of initiatives, programs, and dialogues that are elevating the importance of positive masculinity as part of the fight against gender-based violence. This by no means tells the story that we are making a great deal of progress. But what it does do is to tell the story that we are seeking to make strides to address the core of the problem, which is to focus on young boys and men as we propagate the message against gender-based violence. These programs are run amongst a variety of stakeholders in our country, be it workers, be it students, be it athletes, be it artists. And I was told by a university principal or vice chancellor, as we call them, that prior to having men's dialogues in the campus of some 15,000 students, the harassment of women and the abuse of women and the rape of women on that campus was quite rife. But he then testified that after they commenced holding dialogues, men's dialogues on campus, they suddenly saw a drop in the abuse of women, the harassment of women, and the rapes of women. To a point where some of the young women on campus testified to saying, we now feel much safer as we walk around our campus even at night. We feel safe, and this was because the dialogues were taking place on that campus and men were being brought together to talk about toxic masculinity, about their attitude towards women. And so this conference, as we hold it now, can have a huge impact, not only in our various countries, but on the continent, because men's dialogues do work, and we would like to see them spread throughout the continent as much as we possibly can. Because while with these programs, we can see that while men are the main perpetrators of violence against women and children, men can also be at the forefront of bringing about a new society that respects the equal rights of men and girls, of women and girls. This has been recognized across our continent as well. This conference is now in its third year. The African Union Circle of Champions has been established, and work is underway towards an African convention to end violence against women and girls. This conference is an opportunity to consolidate our political commitment, to accelerate our collective efforts, and to define men's contribution to ending violence against women and girls. Now, as South Africa, we are working with our fellow leaders on the continent, and we stress the importance of an all-of-society approach that brings together business, labor, government, civil society to promote positive masculinity. And this has been so well represented here at this conference. And I'd like to applaud the organizers of this conference that a platform has been given to various groupings in our society, and indeed across the continent, to come and express their views, because this is an all-of-society project. This enables us to develop a common vision and indeed a roadmap and build structures throughout society. Because it is when we work through structures and with structures within our communities at a regional, national, and continental level that we will be able to step up the prevention against abuse of women and girls. The Circle of Champions must continue to inspire high-level leadership in ending violence against women and girls. There must be renewed support for the African Union Commission in ensuring that the Maputo Protocol scorecard and index for the realization of women's rights is popularized and implemented. As we move ahead in negotiating an African Convention on ending violence against women and girls, we must ensure there is accountability through monitoring and evaluating progress that is being made in meeting the commitments of the Kinshasa Declaration. Lastly, we have to address structural inequality by broadening women's access to resources. And this was gainsaid by a number of speakers here, from Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, as she stood here to speak, and many others of those who spoke. Broadening women's access to resources would be one of the key determinants of our ability to properly address this scourge. The availability or creation of jobs and creating opportunities for women, and at the same time also introducing laws, passing laws against the abuse of women and girls in various countries. This is critical. One of the simple laws that does need to be passed, for instance, is discrimination in pay levels, where men and women are paid different wages or salaries for the same jobs. We must ban that type of practice. And we must develop clear policies right across the continent on how we address and combat and eliminate violence against women and girls. And must also develop clear policies of how we advance women's empowerment. We do have great expectations of this conference. We must be creative, as I believe you have been, going by the various inputs that have been made here. We must be innovative, and we must also be resolute when it comes to the design and the implementation of dialogue, safe spaces, and other initiatives that enable men and boys to become more involved in this effort. We should learn from each other and share best practice. If other countries are doing a lot better than all of us, we should take time to learn how they are doing it and where we can improve what we are doing. We should also understand how what works in one context could be adapted to work in another context. We should also see how we can fund this work in an economically constrained environment. Of course, programs such as these require resources. They require money, and we must therefore make sure that money is available. And it's good that we have a business community where all the money resides, and also a government which manages money and hopefully manages the money well. There's one thing, and there's one thing that we all agree on, that positive masculinity can and must be harnessed as a powerful force for good. Ending violence against women and girls everywhere is and must be seen as our collective responsibility as society. But when it comes to the participation of men, that onus is even greater. We owe it to the women and the girls of our various countries and our continent to be better men, to be better fathers, to be better caregivers, to be better partners, and to be better sons. And I think the forebears, our forebears collectively on this continent, demand that the men of Africa should be better people, better men, better husbands, better partners. We should therefore build on the gains of the two first conferences to birth a new Africa that affirms the human dignity, the human equality, and worth of every African woman and girl. Let us leave no man or boy behind in this journey. Let us take every man and every boy along as we proceed to restore, affirm, and to applaud the dignity of the women and the girls of our continent. And may I add, the beautiful women and the beautiful girls of our continent. And I'd like to say, together as an expanding circle of champions, we want to make the convention to end violence against women and girls a reality on our continent. Program Director, you have thrown a challenge at us, and I guess you're throwing the challenge largely at President Azali, Asnami, and myself, and also our sister, President Zwede of Ethiopia, that at the African Union Summit we should hold a side event when we will invite the various president brothers to come together to hear the outcomes of this conference. Yes, we will move all rocks, all rivers, all trees to make sure that it does happen. So we will try to happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, President. We are encouraged. And I will now ask the chairperson of the AU and the president of the Union of Comoros, President Azali Assoumani. Please.
Your Excellency, Cyril Ramaphosa, President of the Republic of South Africa, dear brother, Excellence, dear sister, President of the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia, Your Excellency, Mrs. the Chairwoman of Women Network, Assalamu alaikum. It's a particular pleasure for me to find myself to be amongst you here in South Africa, in this magnificent country that saw the birth of our icon Nelson Mandela, a hospitable country with such a rich inheritance and a precious one. Warmly thank my brother, President Ramaphosa, for having hosted this important conference here in Pretoria, for all the disposition or arrangement made to ensure its success. Thank as well all organizers, including yourself, that enable an effective conference to be held. And I would like to pay a tribute to President Felix Tshisekedi as well as Macky Sall. Thanks to the leadership, the enlightened leadership have impulsed this continental dynamic relative to positive masculinity. Ladies and gentlemen, in last October, I have the honor and the privilege to preside the third conference of the network on positive masculinity that was held in Moroni. It was such a pride for us to be the witness of such a support that all Comorians are bringing to this work, aiming to protect women and girls against all forms of violence. We are gathered here today to take stock of our commitment and define the objective that should be reached to eradicate all forms of violence perpetrated against women and girls. In that context, I thank our sisters, former president and vice president, for the constant commitment in favor of the protection of the women. I know, ladies, that you will continue with your effort with the same determination. I would like to ensure you of our constant support to always take higher and higher the message in favor of the gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls. The Africa that we want is not a land of violence, but a resilient Africa, strong, connected, pacific, tolerant, and united. She has more need of men and women to reach that goal. Make an appeal to men of Africa, whether they are young or aged, to be engaged, partner, and present in the favor of the gender equity and also the empowerment of women and girls. Allow me to share with you the example of Union Comores on relations between men and women that we consider without any pretensions as being an example that should be followed for our continent. Indeed, our traditions, aromatical tradition consolidated by the tolerant Muslim religion has brought the women to benefit of a privilege. The land property is guaranteed to her, which guarantees her safety, her stability, and that of the children. It's indeed a pride for Comorian men to see women being owners of family house. And even myself, I always tell the visitors that come to visit me that I'm living at my wife's place who is here amongst us. In the same context, the equality, women have the same right as men in a position of responsibility, and the family code is very favorable toward them. We should also, in order to build a prosperous Africa based on an inclusive growth and durable development, defend the political framework and with all the resources to the evaluation, the implementation in order to measure the real impact of our commitment within our territories. Ladies and gentlemen, you hear my voice, but it was an obligation to be here amongst you today. Therefore, to conclude, I would like to renew to the South African authorities our gratitude for the warm welcome and congratulate Madam, the Special Envoys of the Union African Commission for Women on Peace and Security, and all of her team for the organization of this meeting and all parallel activities. I also congratulate ministers present here, including Mrs. Yakut of Health from Comoros and the technical teams, as well as our continental organization and international that for the work that were conducted, not only to prepare the consultations that took place in Comoros, and also of this conference on positive masculinity. I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Malibongwe. We will now hear from Sister President, President Sache Wek Zewde.
Thank you very much. Your Excellency, President Cyril Ramaphosa, President of the Republic of South Africa, Excellence, Monsieur le Président Azali Assoumani, President de l'Union des Comores.
President of Azali Assoumani, President of Comoro, and the President of African Union for the 2023.
Former President of Liberia, Patron of Aulin, Nobel Prize awardee, and I can go on and on. My dear sister, Madame Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, Madame la Première Dame des Comores,
the Madam of...
I was tempted to name them all, but I will mention a few names, starting with you, my sister from Zile, Dr. Zuma, the DCP, Special Envoy, Madame Diop, Ahuna, who is not in the room, and so on and so forth. So I would like to greet you all, ladies and gentlemen. I stand before you today with a profound sense of commitment to a cause that has long been at the heart of our collective journey towards a just and equitable Africa with the full participation of women. It is therefore not only an honor, but indeed a responsibility to take the floor at this momentous occasion of the third AU Men's Conference, taking place, as mentioned by President Ramaphosa, during this 16 days activism against women, violence against women and girls. I would like to express my gratitude for the collective efforts that have brought us to this significant juncture. I had the pleasure of attending the meeting which took place in Moroni a few weeks ago, which was a consultation among women leaders. By the way, and I have learned a lot, as President Assoumani just mentioned, the status of women in that country. So that led me to believe that there is a lot that we should learn from one another. The African Union's high-level presidential initiative, initiated in 2020, has indeed become a beacon of hope. What a legacy, my sister, President Johnson Sirleaf. And congratulations, President Ramaphosa, for having been the first champion. This didn't come as a surprise to many of us who know both of you. It reflects our shared commitment to eradicate the scourge of violence against women and girls, to ensure that women and girls suffering violence in Africa today becomes history. We recall the inaugural men's conference, as mentioned many times today, in Kinshasa in 2021 and Dakar conference a year later. Both vital milestones where African leaders pledged to advance actions to prevent sustainably address and end violence against women and girls. The outcome of these conferences, culminating in the Kinshasa Declaration and the Dakar Call for Action, have set the stage for transformative change. Our journey has now reached a pivotal moment. The African Union Summit this year made also a historic decision to negotiate the EU Convention on Ending Violence Against Women and Girls. This convention, once adopted, will stand as the first continental legal instrument dedicated to preventing and eliminating all forms of violence against women and girls, showcasing African leadership